Welcome back to the Lion's Den. In this episode, we speak with Max Shapiro, who runs two very complementary businesses in the startup space out in Silicon Valley. If you want to grow your startup, definitely reach out to Max. Through his business PitchForce, he helps startups find investors to finance their growth. And through his other business, PeopleConnect, he helps startups find the right employee talent to take them to the next level. Max, welcome to the Lion's Den.
Thanks, Nico. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I am excited to dive into this conversation. And, we have a lot of interesting topics to cover for sure, but I couldn't help myself after looking at your LinkedIn profile. You worked for the Phoenix Suns and were the youngest NBA talent scout at one time. Is that right?
To the best of my knowledge, I am still the youngest chief scout in the NBA because the league has gotten a lot more sophisticated. So they're not hiring too many 24-year-olds with limited experience as a chief scout in the NBA at this time.
I think you're right, and I'm a huge NBA fan, by the way. And I think when you were a talent scout, that was back in like the early 70s. So before Magic and Larry even entered the league. This was like before the league was even the league, basically.
The league was the league, but not the way it is today. And you're so right. I'm still a big NBA fan. And there are more assistant coaches now for any NBA team as there was in the entire front office back in the late 60s, early 70s. It's crazy.
Wow.
and wonderful.
Yeah, it really has exploded. Okay, so as I continue to go up your LinkedIn page, then there's like a 25-year gap basically between your time with the Suns and then, you founding your business during the dot-com boom. So what was going on in the 80s and 90s?
Yeah. Let me tell you, when I was a kid, I grew up in St. Louis. I was actually a water boy for the St. Louis Hawks, who are now the Atlanta Hawks. And I went to a basketball camp. In fact, Bill Bradley and I were in the basketball camp the same year because we're the same age. And I was scouting for the San Diego Rockets and then the Phoenix Suns. And there was nobody in California putting on basketball camps like I had attended when I was in high school. So I started to run basketball camps in California when there were only 2 or 3 in the entire state. And after a few years, I contracted with John Wooden, who at the time was finishing his career as the UCLA coach. And we ran Coach Wooden's camps for 6 years for children. And that was really an incredible experience to get to spend quality time with him. And then subsequent to that, did camps with Magic Johnson, who you just mentioned, and Pat Riley, Don Nelson, Rick Pitino, a whole bunch of NBA coaches. And after that, I ran baseball fantasy camps. I was partners with a number of the major league teams, including the Yankees and Dodgers and Giants here in the San Francisco Bay Area where I'm based. And did that for a while, got out of it, and then started a business called Green for Jeans. As you can see on the poster behind me, it's a big old Levi's banner. And we were buying and selling 10,000 to 20,000 pairs of used Levi's every month, exporting them all over the world. And that was a fun business. Sold that in 99, and then was looking for something to do. Somebody said you'd be good at recruiting, and I started PeopleConnect. And now in our 25th year of helping tech companies build great teams. And in addition, PitchForce is something that I started 12 years ago, and my team and I were putting on pitch events for tech companies, alternating between San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And as soon as COVID hit, the next week we were online, and we've been online ever since now in our 5th year, because we have 4 years behind us from the time COVID started. So, interesting times, a lot of changes, a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, cool. So I definitely want to talk about PeopleConnect and then PitchForce. On the PeopleConnect side of things, started that business in 99, toward the end of 99, I believe.
Yes.
So, starting a business in the dot-com boom or sort of leading up to it, I mean, there has to be some kind of story there. I'm always interested in this time period, because the way people talk about it, it's like getting funding was so easy. It's like you walk into a room of investors and you have an idea and you get money. I mean, what was life like then in the business world?
Well, it was crazy. I got in, as you said, the end of 99, and had First year and a half was great because any idiot could make a lot of money in any business related to the startup world. And I had no experience in recruiting. A friend of mine who had been successful taught me the business over a 1 week period in New York. And she said, don't spend too much time on this new thing called the internet. she was behind the times, and so I got started, and it was really easy pickings because all these companies were looking for people. They couldn't find them quickly enough, and we had great people and did really well. And then the bust hit, so we went from boom to bust, here in the Bay Area, and of course it affected companies all over the world. But I was a member of an angel organization that I still belong to called the Keiretsu Forum, and companies were coming and they were looking for $500,000 or $1 million. And we'd say, what's the use of the proceeds, which is a fancy way of saying, what are you going to do with the money? And they said, well, our software isn't done. They were almost all software companies then. And we need some more developers to finish the software, or our software is done. And we need some salespeople to go out and get us some customers. And we said, if you had those people on board, we'd be more likely to invest. And they said, hello, why do you think we're here? How are we going to hire people without money? And this light bulb went off. And I said, there's a bunch of great salespeople and developers that are home, depressed, tired of being an extension of their wife's honey-do list. And maybe some of them would work for 3 to 6 months without a paycheck. And thus we created what we called employees without paychecks. And we were able to find people to do that. And they knew that the company might not get funded, but if they didn't, they would at least be able to put on a resume that they worked for 3 or 6 months for a startup company developing software or in sales. And that was just about 10% of our overall practice up until COVID hit. Once COVID hit, everything changed, and people are not willing to work for options only or without cash for 3 to 6 months anymore. So that's a little bit about. But what it was like then was just really crazy. And then, yeah, it was just a wild times. You could get money for just any idea, many of which were stupid, but they still got funded.
So for a recruiting business in a bust, what happens to the recruiting business? I mean, is it as simple as, well, nobody's hiring, so the recruiting business doesn't have a lot of business, or does it just change in a certain way?
Well, it was difficult to find companies to recruit for because companies were not hiring people, but that didn't last that long. It started picking up, right after the bottom, and was coming back. And we've always been a lean team. There are just 6 of us, so it wasn't like we had massive overhead. And it was, we were able to make it through there and come out on the other side in good shape.
Got it. Okay. And so you also mentioned the Employees Without Paychecks program. You said kind of nowadays, not a lot of people want to work for just equity. Are you still seeing that in the environment?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we had a founder of a company, the brilliant guy who was the head of the bioengineering department at Cal here in Berkeley. And he said, I want to continue to teach. I need a CEO. Can you get me a CEO that will work without a paycheck and raise money and build this company? And I said, no, we can't. But if you could afford to pay him $10,000 a month, $120,000 a year, which is way below market, we can find people to you who are interested in the equity and the upside of what you're doing, what your technology does. And we were able to do that. And so he was happy, and he's got a CEO in there to run the business, and he continues to do what he does. But not, in the past, we were able to get people to do that for 0 cash and a whole lot of equity, but not anymore. And there's really no, reason that anybody can figure out other than that everything's changed. The digital nomad was created by COVID, and it's a great thing. I mean, once COVID hit and we asked potential clients if they were okay with people working virtually, they said no. And then it became several months later, the CEO would say, I can't believe I'm saying this, but yeah, let's try it. Let's give it a whirl. And now, with the exception of a company that's got a physical product that wants a COO that needs to be there to make sure that product gets manufactured properly. Almost all the searches we do, companies are open to virtual, and that gives them, we can now do a national search instead of a search for, a company that's in the, 25-mile radius of Dallas or Rochester. So it's been good for many people in terms of recruiting, where they can recruit, et cetera, and the power that employees now have that they didn't have before, which sort of equal the playing field, if you will.
Yeah. So okay, so that's really interesting. I remember, obviously, right after COVID, everybody went remote, and then you started to see little by little these businesses start to crack down and say, all right, no, you got to be in here 3 days a week. Okay, now we want everybody back in here 5 days a week. And those were sort of some of the largest tech companies, the ones that actually make the news.
Right.
But for, the companies that you're recruiting for, what do you think the percentage split is between, hey, we want a new hire who's going to be on site full time versus hybrid versus remote?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Very few companies want their people in at 5 days a week. Very few.
Okay.
We did pick up a new search for a company, an exciting new company that needs 2 software engineers there in New York. And in the meatpacking district, it's a cool place to be, but they want people in there 4 or 5 days a week. And we met with them today and said, we're not coming up with the kind of candidates that are going to do the job for you. Some of them they're interviewing they like, but we feel we'll be able to get you many more better qualified candidates if you're open to them working remotely and maybe coming in 1 or 2 days a week. So we're going to try that. So it's really rare and this is a company run by two 20-year-olds. It's not a company run by people with gray hair that don't know what's going on in the world, and they would like to create that camaraderie of everybody being in the office together, but it limits the market. So we'll see how we do, and if we're able to come up with some more qualified candidates for them by opening, hey, you don't have to be in the office every day. Let's see what happens. And I'm very confident that we're going to be able to come up with better people for them without them having to be on a hybrid basis or a full-time basis.
Got it. Okay. When it comes to team building, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit in that direction. I'm assuming you guys as recruiters at PeopleConnect, you're meeting with business owners, you discuss their plans, their goals, their team building ideas. Are there any common misconceptions around that you see where you sort of have to coach them on how they should be thinking about team building?
Yeah, I think what's important is that, we want all of our clients to hire really, really smart people. And what we say is you need to be able to be comfortable with hiring somebody smarter than you. But at the same time, they got to be team players. Baseball team is not made up of 9 pitchers. A basketball team is not made up of 9 centers. You have to have different people playing different positions, and the teams that are most successful. And as we're, seeing this on, today on May 20th in the NBA playoffs, that those teams that have pieces that fit together are doing better than those that don't. And that's always a challenge. I mean, hiring is a challenge. We tell our clients we want them to hire slow and fire fast. And, hiring slow makes some sense. Make sure you really like the person. I say it's sort of like dating. If you date someone and you're starting to fall in love and there's 2 or 3 things that you think bugs me a little bit and I know it's going to get better, most of the times it doesn't. People don't change much. So make sure you really love that person. And on the other side, firing fast sounds cruel. But it isn't. If someone is not doing the work that they signed up for and they're not meeting the timelines and you've given them many opportunities, you're better off letting them go so they can go find something that they can be more successful at, that they love better. And the sooner you're able to start the process of replacing them, the better off you are as the owner of that business.
Makes total sense. Hire slow, fire fast. Okay. So about 10 years ago, you also founded PitchForce, which you mentioned a little bit earlier. Could you give me a quick pitch about PitchForce?
Sure. So There was somebody putting on pitch events for early stage startups that should be funded by angels here in the Bay Area. And they only had venture capitalists. And I said, look, I'm really well connected in the angel community. Let me put a panel together of angels, and that worked really well. And then, having been in the events business with our basketball camps, baseball camps, I thought, I can do a better job of running that than this person was doing, and thus I created PitchForce, and we were alternating between San Francisco and Silicon Valley for about 7 years. And then, of course, once COVID hit, we went online, and being online has been a boon, because we get companies from all over the country. And of the 6 companies every week, usually one of them is from overseas. They could be in the UK, they could be in Paris, they could be in Tokyo, they could be in Israel, they could be in, we have companies during the war on PitchForce looking for funding from the Ukraine. It's like
Wow.
amazing that, the guts that those people had, and perseverance and grit that it takes to be a successful entrepreneur. So, what we really do is we help early stages companies get funded. That's a big challenge today. 2021, it was almost like, the late 90s, where, it was so easy to get funded in 2021. Everything was booming. And last year and even into this year, it's more of a challenge. But once they are successful in having their funding, they have another challenge. It's not like they can go to the beach in the Caribbean or Hawaii and just chill because, they now raise 5 million or 2 million or 20 million. No, they got to build a team. That's another challenge. And that's where PeopleConnect comes in. So we help them with their funding, and then we build great teams for them. And what we do that's really unique at PeopleConnect is, as you know, most recruiters will fill one area. They'll be experts in CFOs, or all they'll do is place software engineers. We, on the other hand, place people in any position at any level. It's not just C-level or VP. It's now all the way down to individual contributor for any type of tech company anywhere in the U.S. And that's fun. It's fun helping these companies find great people once they've got the money.
Yeah. I love that's a really creative funnel. I love that. You got the angels on the front end. You basically create these businesses out of the idea stage to, okay, you guys have funding, and then you support them on the recruiting side after that, which is awesome.
Right.
What about, I've run a couple startups in my life in the past, and the hardest part I always found was in the early stages, especially, was customers, sales, basically. Do you have, because you're so like tapped into the community and different networks out there, are you able to help some of these companies that you support with angel funding? Are you able to help them find distribution channels and sales partners and that sort of thing?
We're not doing that, specifically, but what we are really emphasizing is, even before you start fundraising, you make sure you have product market fit right. Will the dogs eat the dog food? Have you surveyed enough people, not your 14 best friends and cousins and uncles, that say they'll buy your product, but have you really gone out, and done the research necessary? And the lean startup movement is a big part of this. And we've seen a lot of companies that have postponed their fundraising because they were not successful in fundraising in last year. And they're working on 2 things. One, the one that you talked about, is getting customers. You've got to have some customers. It's one thing to be able to go out and say that, at the end of 5 years, we're going to be doing $140 million. And but do you have any customers yet? And then some companies will say, yeah, well, we just got started and we're only doing $13,000 a month. But, that was 6 months ago, and we've had a 17% increase every month since then. Then investors are interested. But you've got to be able to make sure that people are going to buy your product. A lot of times people just get hung up on their technology, or they think for sure that the whole world needs this, when it's a nice to have. It's not a have to have.
Yeah. And so that shift you're describing, you're kind of talking about from 2021, when it was easy to get funded, then interest rates rise, cost of capital goes up. Last year was the year of efficiencies, as tech companies called it. And so now what you're saying is, really, investors want to see you've got customers, you've got revenue. It's much more proven, and there's less risk for me to put my money into your business.
Totally, Nico. Totally. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. So for these entrepreneurs, who come to a PitchForce event or other pitch events, really, What advice do you have for them on how to make the most of an event like that?
First of all, prepare. I mean, the companies that come to PitchForce, we work with them on a 4-minute PowerPoint. We give them a template and say, write out 600 words. Forget that you've got a longer deck that you're mailing out to somebody else. Write out 600 words and then put your slides together. Make every slide look like a billboard. Don't hit me with a slide with 8 lines of 14-point font that you're talking about and expecting me to read at the same time. It just blows me away. So put the time in and practice. And the other thing is you really need to be enthusiastic. You got to be fired up about what you're doing. And some people that I talk to, that when we prepare them for PitchForce, they got a PhD in something technical, and they're not salespeople. They're not ebullient. They're not out there selling. And I say, do you have any kids? Yeah. Well, yes, I have a daughter who plays soccer. Great. Okay. Imagine your daughter's playing soccer and they're playing the championship game. You need to get her and her teammates fired up. And that's what you have to do for investors. You have to be enthusiastic about what you're doing. You have to connect with them. You have to make them like you, because, we're going to invest in people that we like. Don't do anything that isn't totally honest, anything that's a little bit slick, because the investors, once they get a whiff of that, you're toast. They're not going to spend any more time with you. So be enthusiastic, have a product that's going to sell. Make sure you've got product market fit right. Make sure that there's enough of a spread between your cost of goods and what you're selling them for. And make sure you're in a really big market. There are a lot of good small businesses that might make the founder $2-3 million a year. That's great. But it's not something that's going to be a $200 million a year business at the end of the 5th year. And then you don't need investors. When you take in investors, you're taking in partners in essence. And that's not easy to deal with. You have to make sure also, on another note, that you like your investors. A lot of times I'll get very inexperienced entrepreneurs say, I've got 3 companies that are doing three VC firms that are doing due diligence on us. That's great. What kind of due diligence are you doing on them? Oh, I didn't think about that. Well, you need to. And it's easy enough to find out how VCs treat companies in their portfolio. Or if you're raising an angel round, how angels have done and dealt with the startups they've invested in. So go to them and say, hey, Susie Stone is taking a look at our company, and I understand that she invested in yours. What's your experience been like working with her? All of those are all things that are important. I've got an ebook that I put together. There's 20 questions that investors want answered before they'll invest in your business. And there's a lot of good resources out there. And sometimes, and it's not too often, we'll get entrepreneurs that don't even know the difference between a convertible note and a safe. And if you're in the startup world, any person who's in the startup world with half a brain knows that. And if they don't, it's easy enough to find out how. But you gotta really know how to raise funds and the best ways to do it. And there are a lot of ways to learn online.
Absolutely. So, all right, I've got one more question that I think we can kind of, start wrapping it up. Once these companies succeed at raising funding, so let's say they come to PitchForce, you match them with some angels, they knock it out of the park, they get these investors. Is it a case-by-case basis how involved those investors will be going forward from your angel network? Or, do you recommend that the entrepreneurs involve the investors a certain amount going forward? What's that relationship like?
Yeah, a lot of investors will want to know, hey, I'm picking up a dozen bagels and I'm going to be knocking at your door at 8:30 on Wednesday morning. I want to be involved. That's, we definitely see that. One mistake I see entrepreneurs doing is not keeping their investors abreast of what's going on in the company. What we strongly recommend is send out a newsletter once a month, some kind of communication, an email, whatever it is. Here's what our goals were for the month. These are the ones we hit. Here are challenges that we have. Keep them informed. And it doesn't take that long. It shouldn't take you more than a half hour to get this off to your investors. And it's amazing how few companies do that. Some of them do it on a quarterly basis, but doing something brief on a monthly basis to let your investors know how you're doing is really important, because you may need to go back to them for more funding.
Yeah, no doubt. Monthly. Yeah. I think when I had a startup, I was doing it quarterly. We would have like a board meeting, and then I would send something out to the rest of my shareholders. But yeah, in the early stages, monthly would be good. I think you're right on that.
Yep.
Cool. So Max, what's the best way? Let's say there's an entrepreneur out there who hears this and they're thinking, "Man, I should go to PitchForce." What's the best way for them to get in contact with you or someone on your team, or sign up or something like that?
Sure. They should just email me directly and I'll get the ball rolling for them. It's max@PeopleConnectStaffing.com, max@PeopleConnectStaffing.com. And we'll tell them more about PitchForce. And if they're looking for people, we can talk to them about that as well. I'm 81 years old. I work about 60 hours a week, but I love what I'm doing. Talking to you isn't work. Talking to entrepreneurs isn't work. It's fun and it's exciting. There's so many new ideas coming around. We're doing a lot of stuff in life science. We'll continue to help many clients that are non-life science, but the life science, the technology and the new products out there are just wonderful, because with life science companies, you can do well and do good. So we'd love to talk to people that are looking for funding and people that are looking for great people.
Love it. Awesome. Well, you guys heard him. Reach out to Max. We'll link to his email in the notes below. Max, thank you so much. Super educational conversation. Thank you for joining me in the Lion's Den.
My pleasure, Nico. Thank you very much.